Yeah.
That's understandable. And so your current role, before we get going, I'm just trying to get some background on your current role.
Flip one slide and you'll find it right there. There you go. You're going to be explaining that.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what the day-to-day looks like now that you've moved from, was it Nationwide? Now you moved over to Crew?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I always joke and tell people, if you would have ever told me that I would be working at an insurance company, I would have told you were kidding yourself. So it's great to be back. I always say kind of back home. Soccer's always been a part of my life. So I was definitely missing it.
I can imagine. Well, excellent. So I think what we're going to do, we're just a few minutes past 4, and as these things go, typically people start pouring in. But out of respect for your time, we're going to get started. So just for all the players on the call and all the families on the call, if you can just keep your microphone on mute, which minimizes all the background noise, we appreciate it. We invite you in the group chat to type in questions, and you can direct those questions to me, Brad Evans. And then what I'll do is basically call on you, unmute you, and then you can ask your questions directly. But to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Tom, just to do a quick introduction. So Tom, it's all yours.
Thank you. And if we lost Frankie, we'll just go ahead with Dante, and we'll see if we can come back to the intros. But no, it's my pleasure to introduce Dante. Actually watched him a little bit as a player, but if you just flip the slide for those who probably not familiar, both Dante and Frankie have spent an awful lot of time in the MLS, and particularly with the Crew, and have come back to work with the Crew. But I think, as is normal, I think a younger generation isn't quite aware of the pedigree of players who've come through the league and the experiences of players who've come through the league. And for someone who's played almost 300 games in the MLS, actually it's 300 games professionally. I think it's about 170 or so in the MLS. That's a pretty impressive list of career accomplishments. You got to tell me about the goal against Mexico, Dante, because that one caught my eye. I think when you come on and you make a debut and you score against Mexico, what did that how'd that come about? I couldn't find quickly if they won or lost or what, but
well, because they don't have video of those anymore. If they do, they probably deteriorated on the VHS tapes. The kids can't even laugh at that. So if I remember correctly, I think it came off of a corner kick, and I just remember the ball coming to me in the air and with my head, and I just brought it down inside the box and got a shot off as quickly as I could, and the ball went back in the net through the goalkeeper's legs, and I went nuts because, you know, it's your dream as a player to represent your national team, and to be in your first game, your first cap and a score was, especially against Mexico, because way back then we weren't even supposed to be in a sniff as good or close to as good as Mexico. So when we were able to drew it, I think the game ended 2-2. All the guys, and I was in college at the time, so all the guys who were out of college and playing professionally, they were really excited because they got a win bonus, and I got a pat on the back and a trip.
And again, the win bonuses in those days are probably about $10. So yeah.
Got extra meal money that week.
Well, it's kind of cool. You end up as an All-American and an academic All-American. So this transition into corporate America is probably no surprise. Anybody who knew you from college. do you want to talk just a little bit about your current situation with the crew, which is at the bottom in red, and then we'll turn this back to Brad?
Sure. So I came on with the crew roughly, oh man, it was probably the beginning of August of last year. And it's a role that we created, a department that we created, and I work on both the business and the soccer side to help create partnerships for the organization. So it could be something like working with youth clubs or youth organizations like Ohio North. Also involved with our sponsorship with Nationwide Insurance and Nationwide Children's Hospital. We have a partnership that we announced at the end of February with COSI. So we'll work with them in developing a number of different initiatives around the science of soccer. Also involved with our player engagement. So our alumni, I'm our point person for our alumni, and also working a little bit with our high potential academy kids and then some of the younger guys on the first team. So it's a pretty broad position, kind of a mouthful in the title, definitely a mouthful in terms of what I'm tasked with doing. But I'm really excited to be, like I said, be back home and be back involved in the game.
That's
you consider Columbus home? That's cool.
What's that?
You came from Baltimore, so you consider Columbus home these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've been here, oh my goodness, altogether, where am I on? 14 years or something like that. Between being here playing and then moving here back in 2008 permanently. It's kind of hard to believe that I've been here so long. But being from Maryland, it's a lot like home, just not nearly as many people and not as much traffic. So I'll take that all day, every day.
Yep, that's good. So Brad, I'll just turn this to you. Unless has Frankie joined us?
Not that I've seen. I'm just checking the list. No,
If he hasn't,
not yet.
we'll just move right along, I
Yep.
think.
Absolutely.
That means you get more airspace, Dante.
Yeah.
No problem.
What's that?
That means you get more airspace. No problem.
Oh, no.
Well, this is tremendously helpful, and again, thank you for taking the time to join us. And I think this is a lot geared towards our players, and not just messaging in terms of what their takeaways, but now it's just an inspirational time too. The kids don't get to play; they don't get to get outside with their friends. So, hearing about your pathway, I think, is helping inspire a younger generation. But the one question I had was that you grew up in Baltimore. And I don't want to say it was a long time ago, but the youth soccer landscape has obviously changed quite a bit since then. Can you just give the players some insight into what club soccer and maybe high school soccer, what it was like for you when you were growing up?
So I would say while things have changed dramatically, they haven't changed really all that much. So I guess the biggest difference is, well, not now anymore, but the Development Academy, I would say there wasn't as many leagues and different organizations that were involved in the game offering opportunities for kids to play. We didn't have U.S. club soccer. There was no ECNL. We basically just had club soccer with our state association, state cups, regionals, and national championships. So there are a lot more kids playing now. There are many more opportunities, but the structure of things haven't changed. It's just more organizations, I guess, being involved.
And so for you, the natural pathway, just because it wasn't so big, was you played some club soccer and then you would go into high school soccer. And
Correct.
Talk a little bit about, maybe some of the positive lessons learned or memories playing high school soccer, and how that helped prepare you, and how the club soccer also helped prepare you for then ultimately going to college.
So I was born in Baltimore, but grew up in Columbia, Maryland, which is about 15, 20 minutes south of Baltimore. So it's a community that's in between DC and Baltimore. And I was really fortunate in that soccer was the number one sport in our community. So there were probably, I don't know, maybe 60, 75,000 people in Columbia. and everyone grew up playing soccer who were my peers, my age group. So soccer was actually more popular than, football, baseball, basketball, all that combined. So it was a very soccer rich area, just with Columbia. But then we also had other cities in Maryland where there was a lot of soccer played and a lot of good soccer played as well. So there was a lot of competition just within our state. And then also Virginia, especially Northern Virginia, there was a lot of competition. So growing up in our club, we would play, I think it was called the National Capital Soccer League. So we would play teams in Maryland, mostly kind of the Baltimore and kind of around, like I said, I'm from Columbia, which is in between Baltimore and DC. So Northern Virginia, so Alexandria, Fairfax, Annandale, all of that area, just kind of outside of DC, just south of DC, up to Baltimore and a little bit west of Baltimore, essentially all the cities that we went to play. Also in high school, in Columbia, it was very, very competitive. Generally, in our division, whoever won in our county generally won the state. So I was fortunate to win 2 state championships in high school. So also other players coming out of Columbia, many of them went and played Division I in college. So it was just kind of one of those expected things where you're around a lot of competitive players and opponents. So you make yourself better because you're playing against better competition. Ironically, a lot of the guys that I played with on my club team, I then had to turn around and play against them in college. So, and to this day, there's still a lot of trash talking that goes on many, many years later about who won this game, who won that game. So it's definitely have very fond memories of playing club soccer. I was fortunate to play in the national finals at under 16. We lost, but still was able to make it through states, make it through regionals, and had some success. But yeah, very fond memories from club soccer and high school soccer, which really, really helped propel me to go play in college, which I wasn't very highly recruited coming out of high school.
Well, that's an interesting point because, obviously Radford is an excellent school, but you said you weren't highly recruited, and that conference isn't one that you would think of in terms of a top tier conference, Division I nationally. So as you're playing on this nationally competitive club team, did you have a sense that, you were good enough, that you were different, a better player, or were you still finding your way at that time?
I would say that I was always one of the better players. I was always played forward. I never played any other position. I think early on, I probably was around, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years old. I vividly remember one practice where our coach he put me in goal to be a goalkeeper, and it went so horribly wrong that he just threw me right back to be a forward. So I was, I don't know, I just have never tried to be a defender. I've always played as a forward. So I don't know, take that with a choice, because I know we talk about trying a lot of different positions, but I never did. So I guess I had a lot of time to hone my craft, so to speak. But yeah, I just continued playing, and I never really thought that I was going to get to where I ultimately ended up being. I can remember in high school having a conversation with my best friend's dad, and we were arguing so much about soccer and whether it was an Olympic sport or not, that I knew, I was like, yes, it's definitely an Olympic sport. He has no idea what he's talking about. Number one, he didn't know anything about soccer, so I knew that I was right. But he was so dead set in his opinion that I started second guessing myself. And this was probably around 86, 87. And next thing you know, I'm playing in the Olympics in 1992. So I convinced myself that, okay, maybe it's not. But then ironically, years later, I'm actually playing the Olympics. So you just never know where you're going to end up. But I just loved playing. I think that's the one thing that I say to the younger generation, younger kids. You have to enjoy it. And in anything you do in life, it helps out tremendously if you love what you do.
So were there times, or maybe not were there times, what kind of things or how often did you do things away from an organized soccer setting? Did you train on your own, kick a ball against the wall, practice juggling, do heading, um, anything like that, sort of the self-training?
I loved the game. All I wanted to do was play soccer. I mean, I played other sports, football, basketball, in the community with my friends. I played a lot of soccer as well in the community with my friends. So I took any opportunity that I had. I wanted to play, whether it was um, me against 3 or 4 other kids, because that's what I would do sometimes, just in the parking lot. We lived in a townhouse at one time, and I would just get some of the kids, and some of them were younger than me, and they may not been very good, but just to play, I'd say, all right, me against you three, and we would play. So it was just one of those things that was in my blood. I truly love playing. So I can also remember after one game got canceled. As a kid, you get your shin guards, your socks on, your cleats, and everything. You're ready for the game. We got that call like, oh, it's rained out. The game's canceled. Well, I was already dressed, so then I just went up to our elementary school and just started kicking the ball against the wall. And I find it kind of funny now that with all of these different equipment that has been developed and created, a lot of people are going back to right now just the ball and a wall. It's all you need. And I say it all the time. The wall is one of your best teammates because it'll tell you whether you gave them a good pass or not.
That's fantastic.
You kick it too hard and you can't trap it, or it goes over your head, or it goes past you and you can't get it. That kind of tells you what kind of touch was required for that kick or pass.
So when you go to Radford, you're not thinking pro soccer career. This is how I'm going to earn a living as an adult.
No, it was. I had 2 full scholarship offers. I was fortunate to have 2 full scholarship offers to go to college, and Radford was one of them. So it was basically to continue playing soccer and not have to pay as much for college.
So when did that thought change? Is it during college you start to see you're having a lot of success and all of a sudden, hey, there's some avenues opened up?
Yeah. So my freshman year, I led the nation in scoring. So I kind of came out of nowhere. Then my second year, so my sophomore year, the third game of the season, I broke my leg, my ankle. Someone stepped on me, so I redshirted that season. The next season after that, I came back and I led the nation in scoring again, and that's when I kind of got noticed at the national level. So I grew up never playing any ODP. I tried out but didn't make it. But by the time I guess that made me 18, 19, 20, I was now a part of back then they had what was called the U.S. Olympic Festival. So they had the 4 regions, East, West, North, and South, and I was in the East. And they would bring all the different athletes, and it wasn't just soccer, together to compete. And it all started from there, because out of that pool of players over 2 years, it created the pool for the Olympic team. So really, it all happened kind of happenstance, where I had success a couple of years in college, and next thing you know, I'm a part of a pool of players that I never thought that I would be playing with.
So how do you that's a fascinating story to say, hey, I wasn't ODP, I wasn't recognized. Freshman year, college, I lead the nation in scoring. Was it something that you developed? Is it a skill you spent the summer working on finishing? Was it a combination of skill and physical? Was it coaching and teammates? What do you think?
It was, well, one of them was definitely physical. So the summer before my freshman year in college, and over that first semester, I would say I grew maybe a half an inch or an inch, but then more importantly, I put on like 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Like I really kind of grew, which helped out a lot. So much so that when we came back home during the winter break, I was out at at a party, and I walked past one of my old teammates who was older than me from high school, and he like did one of those double takes. He's like, "What happened to you?" You know, you're in your own skin, so you don't realize that you've really grown a lot, but that's essentially what happened. When I talk with my old club coaches, they said that I was always pretty good at scoring, but you know, I think I really, and I also say that in high school, I played behind a kind of in the shadow of another player who at the time was in the regional pool, national team pool, did really, really well. Went to Clemson his freshman year, but then he actually my senior year, he went to a different school. He went to a military school. So it kind of put me maybe on the front burner, really, where I was the one who was being asked to step up. And I was always used to that, but I think maybe him not being there allowed me to grow and blossom a bit. But then once my freshman year hit, that's really when it all took off. I really can't put a finger on it. Maybe it was a fitness thing because I remember doing a whole lot of running my freshman year. But there were a number of different things where the factors just came in, and I think like I said, I've always scored wherever I was. So I think just maybe the physical preparedness and kind of my coach really allowing me to play and give me the reins to do what I wanted to do, and my teammates being good about helping me along.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson because, and Tom's put it in the chat room about late bloomers, and we see it in all the time in the club or ODP level that players will look like they're not making a massive impact at a certain age, and we've got to keep reminding people that development takes time and people grow at different times. But I think hearing what you're saying, your passion remained consistent, and so as you caught up physically, now all of a sudden your career takes off. Which is good. I can see in the chat room there's some kids that put in their juggling records. I think, is it Marco's got 1,100? He wants to know if that's going to beat you.
It does for sure now.
That's a good thing. And just to remind your kids, if you want to put questions in, I think we've got one from Matt Amoroso. So Matt, I'm going to try and unmute you so you can talk directly to Dante. So Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Dante. My son is 10 years old and plays for a premier club. We're kind of at that age where we're kind of looking forward a little bit, dreaming, I guess you could say too. Just trying to figure out what's more important, finding the right high school or the right club, like which way to go to, to get some recognition or the right pathway.
Well, the right pathway is going to be different for each family, each kid. I'll say the one big difference that we had in Maryland, which you have here, is your public schools and your private schools play against each other for the championships. We don't have that in Maryland. Honestly, I think that's a bit unfair because the private schools have different resources than most public schools. So in terms of finding the right one, it's kind of difficult because if you can go to was it St. Ignatius? Is that the one up in? So I think they're perennially in the finals. So if you could go there, then okay, yeah, that's the right school because they're always winning state championships. But if you can't, then what do you do? I would say he's only 10. You've got a long road. Just take it year by year because so much can change year to year with his development. I mean, I'm a prime example of that. His interest level, even now with all the uncertainty about what's happening with youth soccer and all the different opportunities that may or may not be there in another couple of years. I would say that if you find a club and coach that you feel is developing him both as a person and as a player and not looking for it being in the short term, then that's probably a right situation for you. Unfortunately, I think at times there are coaches who try to coach for the short term and just win, and sometimes that's at the detriment of the development of the players. So it's more a development of the team and not a development of the players. Because I always say, if I were to coach and I have a young team, I would tell my parents, the first parents meeting, don't be surprised when we lose, and we might lose a lot, because we're not trying to win as a team. We're trying to win as a collection of players. And if you win as a collection of players and developing each of these players, then that should lead to the team having success. But it probably won't happen early on.
Dante, that's an interesting response. It's a great response. Maybe talk a little bit about why you made it very clear that, yes, being finding a coach that's going to help you grow as a player is important, but you also mentioned the balance between growing as a person and a player. Did you have experience with that, with particular coaches that you felt really helped your development because of it?
Absolutely. I mean, and I say it all the time now, and I would ask parents to have that question of themselves, to say, what are you paying for? What do you think that you are actually paying for? Because I would venture that if you ask your sons, in this case, years down the line, do you remember the specific drills and things that your coaches did when you were 10 or 12 years old? And they probably won't remember, because I sure don't, but I mean, that was a long time ago. But I do remember some of the things, how they made me feel and what they did for me. So I've had a lot of coaches who are very influential, and, you know, I'll often say that coaches are a lot of times like a big brother, an uncle, a father figure for young men, and you don't even realize the impact you have until many years down the line. So I'm still in communication with my U12 coach. I think he had me U12, U15, U16 coach, my high school coach. So, I mean, these are people that I've known virtually my entire life, and they're still a part of my life.
So I think that's a testament to their contributions. And Tom had a question that he threw up there was, do you have any recollection of coaches that nearly turned you off of the game or had a detrimental impact?
At the youth level, or are we talking my entire career?
Either.
Yeah. So it was a national team coach, believe it or not. And this story's out there on the internet. You would probably have to do some searching for it. But what year was this? It was probably 97, 98, when I was playing in Dallas, and the national team coach called me in. And the question was, have you ever played right back? And as I told you, I've never played defense. I never played anything other than striker. And I said, no. He said, well, would you be interested in coming in to play for the national team? Like, well, absolutely. I'd love to play for the national team. I played for the national team before, and the national team comes calling. You pretty much say yes, especially back then, because it was really, really hard, really difficult to get seen and brought into a national team camp. So this was probably over a 2 or 3 week time frame, and the media is talking about it, and I'm doing interviews, and my response, if I remember correctly, was, I feel like I'm trying to get my PhD in 2 weeks, because, like I said, I'd never played. Kids don't even know what a PhD is. Oh my gosh! So it's like basically I'm trying to learn all I can about this position in a little bit of time, which normally should take years and years and years. So, like I said, doing different interviews, and game time comes, or practice comes, and I'm on the second team, and I'm trying to play as a right back, and during the game and everything, I'm watching the tendencies of the right back and outside backs, and then tell me to go warm up. I go warm up, and I'm stretching, and the assistant coach comes down, and Neil's, he goes, all right, you're going in, but you're going in up top. And I was like floored, because like you said you brought me in here to be a right back, but now you're telling me that I'm going to go out there for 15 or 20 minutes and play forward. So mentally, I was not in a mindset to go play forward, even though that's what I'm used to playing. Went out and I had a terrible game. I was not happy. I was visibly upset after the game, and he asked me, "How are you doing?" I was like, "Not good." I realized I did not play well. I'm not happy about it. And he told me, he says, "Well, you need to take advantage of your chances when you get them." And it turned me off literally from ever wanting to play for the national team again. And this is a national team coach who's doing this. And then I saw an article later where he said he was doing that as a ploy to threaten his defenders. So he basically used me as a guinea pig, as a test. And that at that time, I was like one of the top scoring leaders in the league. I was like top 5 in the league. So yes, Tom, I can see your reaction.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you train for, hopefully you prepare players in training for what you want them to do in games.
Yes. And to
so
spare you, Tom, it was Steve Sampson.
Yeah. Maybe to veer and use that example as a direction to take the conversation. So this is a major situation that's occurred in your career. So how do you pick up from that and say, okay, what's next?
Well, I literally just went back and I asked him, what can I do to get back in? He said, just continue to play well. And I finished that season, I think top 5 in scoring in the league, but he never brought me back. So at that point, I just wrote it off and was like, I'm never going to play in the national team again, at least as long as he's coach. And I'll just focus on playing here with Dallas. And I'll say I was really upset because you just don't go playing with people like that. But you're going to have setbacks in your career, and you take those as learning opportunities, and it actually helped drive me after I kind of got over the disappointment of not playing well, number one, and then of what happened. But I rebounded, and I say the kids, it's not when you get knocked down, but it's how you get back up. And I was able to get back up and continue on for a number of years.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. That, I appreciate you sharing with everybody that, because that's probably not the easiest thing to talk about. But it's super important, I think, for kids to hear that sometimes things don't go well, and then what?
Things won't go well. Won't go well.
Yeah. So
if they go really well, then probably not pushing hard enough.
Well, that was going to be maybe a little bit of a lead in, right? So you're coming out of college, MLS hasn't kicked off yet. And maybe pull the curtain back, because I think our players have access to a ton of soccer on TV and internet, and they see the glamour and the money and the visibility. And yet you come out of college and you play in an indoor league for 2 years. Can you pull the curtain back a little bit on, maybe the less glamour, but this is driven by passion and your desire to play? What did that environment look like?
I'll say so indoor soccer has been around for many, 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 many years in different variations. Always the same thing, just a different league. And I remember growing up playing at halftime in some of the Baltimore Blast games and really looking up to a lot of those players, because there were a lot of really good players back then. But then by the time I came out of college, and then once I went and played indoor, it was a much different league. And actually there were 2 competing leagues. And I was fortunate in that the league that I played in, a number of our owners owned NBA or NHL teams. So I played for the Washington Warthogs, and our owner at the time was Abe Poland, who owned the Washington Capitals and what was called then the Washington Bullets. So when we trained at where the Caps and the Bullets played. When we traveled, a number of different cities that we went to, we were like in Anaheim. I think they're Anaheim Ducks played where they played. So we had really nice travel and accommodations. And I know that the other league, it wasn't necessarily the case. And kind of similar to the early years of MLS, we were just happy to be playing professional soccer in the U.S. And to continue on our passion and hopefully build something that was sustainable. I ended up leaving that, but it still was, to be able to say that you are on TV and you're making money, although it wasn't a whole lot of money, making money doing something that you love was a fantastic feeling.
And then you earn your way into MLS. Talk about those first years in the MLS, new league. What's training like? How competitive was it to get a roster spot, to stay on a roster, to get playing time?
Well, I was fortunate in that as I said, I played in the Olympics and played with the national team. So I came into the league I think it was in May or June of 1996. So the season had already kicked off. And through a relationship that a coach in my hometown had with one of the assistant coaches here, I ended up here in Columbus. But soon got traded to Dallas. Literally, I think it was a little after a month that I got traded to Dallas. So it was kind of a whirlwind for me in the beginning, because I figured I'm going to set roots in Columbus, getting to know all the guys, and then the next thing you know, I'm off to Dallas. So it was a little bit of quite an adjustment to go from, I was in Maryland, then I come to Columbus, and then I'm in Texas. So within 2 or 3 months, I lived in 3 different states. So, but I mean, the nature of professional sports is you go somewhere and you kind of adapt and take on where you are. Once you've made a team, that's the easy part. The hard part is staying, because I knew that every day, every training, every game, I'm being evaluated. And they're looking outside to bring someone in. There's some younger kid who wants to take my position. So that was a challenge that I had internally, to make sure that I was competing at the highest level that I had, where I was, to ensure that I was still remained on the team. So it was a lot.
And is the training environment at the national team level different than the training environment at the pro level?
Yes and no. So I mean, you're still playing with very high caliber players, but unless you're involved in like a heated game, like a World Cup qualifier or the World Cup, obviously the dynamics are different. So I only played in friendlies, so it'd be interesting to hear Frankie's perspective if he was here, because he's been through all of it, all the way up to playing in the World Cup. So there was still a high level, because we also had players coming from other countries, and it was theoretically the best players, best American players, and then bringing in some foreigners. So like in Dallas, one of my teammates was Leonel Alvarez, who played for Colombia's national team in 94. Was a very, very good player, and he went on to play other places and was their national team coach for a while, and had another teammate who came straight to Dallas from playing in Bayern Munich. He was Swiss and played in '94 World Cup and just completely dominated against the U.S. when he played. So there were definitely a lot of very, very good players back then. So the training was still intense, and it's an everyday thing when you're playing with your club team versus you're coming in for a set time frame when you're with the national team. But when you're with the national team, there's absolutely a lot of pressure.
Tom wanted to ask if there were players who maybe didn't give their best on a regular basis at training.
Of course. Yeah. You're always going to have those types of players. And it's unfortunate, but I'd say that at times they may not perform up to their capabilities, but then when push comes to shove and it's time to play, they show up. So, I'd rather have someone who's not a practice player show up in the games than someone who's a practice player and not show up in games. And I would say that there are probably certain players who were afforded that ability because of, how good they were.
Who were some of the best players that you played with and against?
So if I look at teams, I would say those two. So Alain Suter, he was our midfielder, played in Bayern Munich, from Switzerland. Leonel Alvarez. We had a guy, also Damian Alvarez, who played in Mexico. He's Mexican. Obviously, Brian McBride here with Columbus. Played with Frankie as well. So I was fortunate to play with a lot of very good players: Kyle Martino, Robin Fraser, Chad Marshall, John Bush. I mean, there are a lot of really good players I was fortunate to play with. Jeff Cunningham, I don't know how I forgot. Edson Buttle. I mean, it's interesting because I think it was a 2000 or 2000. It was 2001 when you kind of go back and look at the record books. Our 4 forwards were myself, Brian McBride, Jeff Cunningham, and Edson Buttle. So 2 of those played in the World Cup. Jeff was in a national team picture at one time. I was in a national team picture at one time. We were all on the same team.
It's an impressive crew.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah. And it's funny because if you talk to Edson, so he went on to score more than 100 goals in MLS. I know Jeff and Brian probably had 60-something, 70. I had 50-something. So these are all players who scored a significant number of goals in MLS. And Edson was the youngest when he came in, so his career lasted longer probably than the rest of us. But he will even say, like, man, I came in as a rookie, and these are the 3 people that I had in front of me to learn from. So we had a great time, though. Even though we were competing against each other, we all got along really well.
Matt Amoroso has a question for you.
Dante,
Okay.
who's the toughest goalkeeper you played against or to score on?
Oh, wow. So that's a good one. Let me think about that. Matt Reese was probably was a tough goalkeeper. He was actually very, very good. Let me think. Zach Thornton, Chicago. I can remember striking one ball from outside the 18. I hit it really, really well. And I'm like, all right, this is going right in the upper left corner. And somehow he went and got to it. And he was still to this day is a really good friend of mine. And I said something to him. I was like, I didn't think you were getting that one. And of course he got it. And he was a national team goalkeeper as well. So those are probably the ones that stick out the most in my mind. Ironically, throughout my career, some of my best friends on my teams have been goalkeepers. So I was fortunate to play with some really good ones in Columbus as well.
Dante, how do we get more young American players playing in MLS? Is this a management thing? Is it a young players need to have the drive to do it? Is it a college we need to stop players going to college? What are your thoughts?
I see that there are probably 2 things that are creating pressure on the young American player. One is we're a lot more international, so you have more internationals, especially young internationals, coming to play in the league, which then creates fewer opportunities for young Americans to play in the league. I guess it's fortunate that some of our best young players are actually going to Europe and playing. So when we first started the league, most of us were older. I was 26 years old when the league started. There weren't a lot of young guys coming in, and we were there to help build the league. So now that the league is on solid footing, there are the opportunities for younger players, but then like I said, when you have fewer opportunities because more internationals are coming in, it makes it more challenging. But that just needs, it's on our young players to develop, to raise their level, to be able to make it in.
And you talked about some of the young American players. What are your some of your favorite young Americans? What do you foresee, not just as MLS, but nationally in terms of young American players?
I'll say the young crop that we have of young players right now is unbelievable. So the Weston McKennies, the Paxton Pomyals, obviously Christian Pulisic, all those kids, I think they're probably anywhere from the 20 to 23, 24 age group. Tyler Adams, it's a really, really good crop of kids. And they are, in my mind, really the future of U.S. soccer men's national team. They're playing at some of the highest levels internationally, where you haven't seen that on that level for the kids at such a young age, at least by our terms. I don't think we've ever seen that, and I think it's a byproduct and evolution of the game. Because I think people often say, "Well, where's our Messi and where's our Ronaldo or where's our Pele or Maradona?" It's like you realize you just named some of the best players ever, and they came from what, 3 countries? Countries who have much richer soccer history than us haven't produced a Messi, haven't produced a Ronaldo. Let's produce Alan Shearer first before we try to talk about a Ronaldo or a Messi. That's Americans expect the best all the time. And, right now, like if we look at, I always go to look at John Harkes and Ian Harkes. It's the first, I think they were both National Player of the Year and playing professionally. Christian Pulisic, his father played professionally. His mother played at a really high level in college, and I think she may have been a national team picture for a bit. So you only have now these kids who've grown up emulating someone who did a very good job of playing, and you only can see that grow. So probably the best sports family are the Mannings, where Archie Manning, Peyton, Eli. So it kind of goes to, and I can't remember who it was. Is it Todd Bean? Or I can't remember, where they talk about soccer starts at home, where he focuses on teaching parents to teach the game. That's essentially what has been happening in basketball and football and baseball for many years, and now it's starting to happen in soccer.
Yeah, I think we could agree that environment matters, especially starting young.
Yeah.
When you're talking about some of those young national team players, the next question is, so we've got players spreading around the world, some domestically, some around the world, who are playing in top leagues and developing. What about a U.S. soccer identity? Do you think we should be looking to identify, players with flash, or do you think we should, build around organized structure, be disciplined? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, but I think it's part of I won't say like a overhaul, but I think it's something that would have to start from the top with the senior national team, and then kind of trickle down into the the younger age groups. And I'm just speaking on the men's side here. Eric Winalda put it very well a number of years ago, where you had, at different age groups for our national teams, you had different styles of play. So if you're going from a U17 to a U20, U20, U23, you have theoretically 3 different styles of play, and you're asking the kids to play differently. And I think that's something that Greg Berhalter is trying to institute and trying to implement as a way of playing. Some people are taking the task for it, and I even told him, like, I can't believe it, because people have said for years that we don't have an identity. Now you're trying to give an identity, and people are mad at you giving an identity. and you can call the task the way that he's doing it, but at least he's trying, and we've never had it. So I would like to see that, but I don't think we have the institutional patience to be able to wait for that.
Matt, you had a question about the MLS draft.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I've seen kids get drafted, and I watch, the NBA draft, and obviously the football draft are big things. What is your feeling on the MLS draft? Is it effective, or is it a good tool for players?
It depends. I mean, it's like I said, it's become really hard for young American players to make it, young college players, I should say, to make it, because there are also some international players who are in college that are also being drafted. That's why I think it's important for teams to have like a USL or MLS2, whatever you want to call it, a team for the younger kids to be able to still be in the system here within MLS, but they may not be playing for the first team on a regular basis. So continue to come in and get continue to develop, because it's not easy moving from college to the pros. So I think you'll probably see it, even this year. It wasn't as much of a kind of pomp and circumstance and a lot of theatrics, for lack of better words, around it. I think you'll probably continue to see that, because even looking at some of the actions of the coaching staffs over the past couple of years, I don't think that some of the organizations see a lot of value in it.
That's interesting. In this last few minutes that we have, if you want to take a moment and talk a little bit about the current direction of the Crew. We've obviously got Caleb Porter and Darlington Nagbe, who, spend time here in Akron. Obviously the season has been altered, but, take a moment and talk a little bit about what you see positively happen with the Crew.
Well, it's unfortunate that, because I think there's been a lot of positives with the whole new transition to the new ownership group, new leadership. We got into the season, started off really well, have a lot of positive momentum, and then, we're in the situation that we're in now. But I feel we've made a lot of good decisions, both on the soccer side and the business side, especially on the soccer side. With our off season, we were unbelievably busy, bringing in Darlington, bringing in Lucas Zillarian, who, when I talk with Bez and folks on the coaching staff, they are really, really excited about him. And if you go look at some of his highlights, he's special, and you could see it. And unfortunately, we don't get to see it, and he's not being able to come in and get really comfortable. But he is a really, really special player. So I think we're both on the business and the soccer side, we're going definitely in the right direction. With our new stadium, with our new training facility that we'll have where the current stadium is right now. It's unbelievable. I'm so excited and tickled to be back and involved with the team now, because quite honestly, it's part of the reason why I wanted to come back, is because I really see that a lot of positives and a lot of great growth for our organization and what we do in the community in the years to come.
And just to finish up, and maybe this isn't on the radar in Columbus, but maybe it is league-wide. When U.S. Soccer announced the DA was going to be disbanding, but clearly there was conversations happening behind the scenes with MLS forming their own academy league. But there was a statement in the back of that said, "and future opportunities on the girls' side." Uh-huh. Is that something that has been talked about behind the scenes that you're aware of? What are you hearing?
So I'll say in conversations that I've had with people in the soccer community, that question comes up quite a bit, and I haven't heard a lot of conversation about that internally. It's definitely on our radar. We're hearing what people are saying and asking about. But I would say from at least just the Columbus Crew, from my perspective, we're in a transition into new ownership, new stadium, new training facility. A lot of people didn't think we were going to be here, including myself at times. I would like to see us get this house in order, because if we don't get this house in order and we bring on something else, then you run the risk of having two things that aren't in order. But I also think that there's a lot of opportunity on the women's side, because it's definitely growing. I mean, we all see it, and we're all talking about it, and it's probably, similar to MLS. It's all part of the evolution of the women's side, because they've had leagues that have started and folded. We've had NASL, and then we had other tries at other leagues that didn't make it. Unfortunately, now MLS has been there for 25 years, so I can definitely see a time when there's probably a more robust opportunities on the women's side.
Excellent.
And I have two daughters, so
as do I.
I'd love to see them be able to play professionally someday too, if that's what they want to do. My 9-year-old kind of playing with the idea of playing soccer. She one week is out there kicking the ball, and the next she's taking pictures of her sister and around the house and playing whatever. So
I hear you there.
She has time though. She has time.
Well, hey, Dante, just from my standpoint, I want to thank you again for taking the time to share your insights. You got a fascinating story to tell for all of us, players and people in the game. Tom, I know you wanted to close up shop here for a minute. So, Tom, you have anything you want to add?
Well, did the kids get the questions answered that they wanted answered?
They got a bit shy today.
Yeah.
All right.
It's interesting. Sometimes, you want to get involved. They're all keen to answer questions, and that's all right. I thought it was fascinating just listening to your story, Dante. I've watched it a little bit. You actually came into college when I started coaching in college in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get the timeline right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there at the fall of '88.
Yeah, so I was at Cleveland State from '87, so there was definitely overlap, because I think that's where I started hearing your name with Radford.
Mm-hmm.
But just listening to your story unfolding, and probably it's most significant, it's just the number of times that things haven't gone quite well enough, and it's like, okay, I got to move forward again. No, it's just not quite working. I got to move forward again, and you get a little bit of a break here, and you work hard here, and that's so important for the players to hear that things just don't happen just because they've got a little bit of talent that they're not willing to take their lumps and move on with. So just thank you for being honest and sharing that with people, because it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I say it again, it's your growth is not a straight line up. And again, you're going to have some setbacks. There's probably going to be a coach or someone who tells you you're not good enough. My Olympic team coach told me I didn't have a good enough left foot, went and worked on my left foot. But he also said I would want him on my team, so it's kind of funny. And just because there's a coach who says you're not good enough doesn't mean that you're not good. You might not be the right fit for that team, for that coach, but continue to practice and find other people who can push you, because that's the only way you're going to improve.
And I'm looking forward. I know we've got some projects that are going to be coming into focus soon when the new stadium and all of the trimmings kicks in. So
you got that back there.
To that. Yeah, I just thought through that up. That was, for those of you who don't know, that's what the new Crew Stadium is going to look like, just south of Columbus. So, Dante, thank you.
No problem.
Be in touch soon. And stay safe. Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
Stuck in
you
house
too.
with all your family.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Dante, that was superb. Thank you.
No problem.
That was really good. The messaging is just fantastic, isn't it?
So how old they look like they're pretty young. Was this 10, 11,
Eli
12?
Henry, how old are you? Marco and Nicolai, how old are you?
I'm 11.
11. And Tyler, how old are you?
15.
Okay, we got a 15-year-old. Right. Yeah,
Nice.
there were some young kids there.
Yeah.
10, 11, 12. That was back in the days when you're 10, 11, 12, you're out doing the autograph hunting. That was super. Anyway, all right.
Yes, good story.
All right.
So-
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
See you
All right.
soon.
All right.
Cheers,
See ya.
Dante.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.